So I'm gonna start out by saying this. I bought this plugin day one, so personally it made too much sense to me and my workflow to ignore. So I figured I'd run you through my take on why I think this new SSL 4K-G plugin is so cool. So be sure to give this video a like and subscribe if you're new. To support the channel further, go to thestevekinney.com where you can find the Art of the Vocal Mix course, my latest presets, or to book one-on-one time with me directly to help with your productions. So this video is going to be broken down into a few major overall reasons why I like this plugin and why I think it's a must-have, especially if you don't have an SSL console plugin emulation in your kit already. But even if you do, it has some unique things about it that I think really makes it worth it. It was why I bought it. Starting with the preamp section, a lot of SSL plugin models do model the Jensen transformers that are found on a lot of the SSL consoles. However, depending on which plugin model you have, you might have a model that's based off of the JE115KE. This G series plugin model has modeled the JT115KE, which is supposed to have more even order harmonics, which for me, I find more musically pleasing. So when I wanna get overdrive, it doesn't get overdone too quick and it doesn't get too harsh too quick, which again can be found on the 4K-E plugin that they made recently as well. What can't be found anywhere else is the variable mic impedance borrowed from the FX383 outboard unit, which is really just a fancy way of letting you shape the tone in creative ways, especially when paired with saturation. Now, I think the most popular reason for getting an SSL console emulation plugin has always been the EQ workflow. And this one is unique in that it features the high mid frequency and the low mid frequency switches from the 292 pink knob EQ, letting you shift mid bands to the extremes of the spectrum for that unique curve that you really can't get on the other models like the 4K-E. You can use this to make moves like cut down on S-ing on a vocal in an area that would have been unreachable by the other SSL EQ models. You also have built into this version of the plugin model the 242 black EQ flavor, which is kind of more common for SSL plugin models. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds there. Next up is the dynamics section. Of course, SSL has modeled the dynamics section specific to the G series console, which in their own words is supposed to provide a refined tightness to the compression characteristic. For me or you, it just means that we get a different flavor of dynamics control versus all of the other plugin models that are out there. And again, if you've followed me on the channel, I'm a big fan of things that are unique, so I like this. Finally, we need to talk about the output fader or the output VCA fader. More specifically, we need to talk about the model that they included on this plugin, which is the blue can model. And now that VCA is supposed to be slightly cleaner, but it should still add a bit of character at the end of your signal. But more importantly, how it gets there. And it's more of a workflow thing, which is the next talking point, which is how this thing interacts with SSL 360. So where I find that this SSL plugin emulation is so much fun, and the biggest point of difference of this plugin versus the next one is that when it's paired with the SSL UF8, which I have right here, it truly turns your DAW into some sort of weird digital recreation of your own compact SSL console. And it kind of recreates a workflow that feels a bit analog, depending on where you put this plugin in your insert chain. I mean, if you think about it from the standpoint of an analog situation, right, you're gonna be sending everything out of the box, so you'll have 32 tracks coming out of the box and then going into the returns on the console or into the inputs on the console, and then you're just mixing using the console's faders. And depending on where you put your plugin insert in your insert chain in your DAW, once you jump into SSL 360, you can use the faders here, and now you're mixing with some non-linearities of that blue can fader sound. So it's really cool. So let's dive in and see all of this in action. If you've ever spent hours trying to get a vocal to sit right, only to end up more confused than when you started, then you don't need better plugins, you need a better approach. That's why I created the Art of the Vocal online course. It's not just your typical watch me click stuff tutorial. This is a no-nonsense, side-by-side studio experience. You're with me the whole time, and we take it from the top. You'll learn the tools, techniques, mics, placement, cue mixes, recording, comping, editing, tuning, and mixing. We go from top to bottom with vocal production. More than just an arbitrary demonstration, this is the real deal, a real client, and a real track. And in this course, you'll have access to over 15 hours of educational and real-life working session demonstrations from the same client track, so you see the full picture. In addition to the live working sessions, you'll have access to hours of course learning material and downloadable cheat sheet guides to help you offline out of the classroom. Recording great vocals is so much more than hitting the red record button. Recording vocals is an art. Enroll today and join me in the studio to build better vocals together in the art of the vocal. All right, diving in, we're just gonna do like a quick kind of recap of the plugin GUI and kind of how to use it. Across the bottom here is where you're gonna find the SSL preset browser, as well as oversampling and settings that are accessible to this plugin. You can also scale the plugin down here. So let me scale it up for you guys so you see it a bit better. Okay, beyond the bar at the bottom, you have the plugins kind of broken into like 3 major sections. You've got an EQ section over here. You've got kind of like your channel section right here, and then you've got your compressor and dynamic section on the right. And then kind of right at the top here, it tells you what your channel number is in SSL 360. And right here, you can open 360, etc. On the left-hand side, you get the distinct SSL looking LED signal meter. And then separating out the 3 sections, you have your input meter on the left and then your output meter on the right. Okay, so let's pull up SSL 360. Okay, so when you pull up SSL 360 and you're in the meter section, one of the reasons that I really like this plugin and this whole SSL ecosystem is what you're seeing here. Basically created this virtual hybrid digital console, and it's really unique, right? You know, for years, people would say, oh yeah, throw this plugin across every channel in your track and you can use the plugin fader to mix. But I always felt that was like very inaccessible because, well, let's face it, this is the plugin GUI. So if I start pulling all of these up, okay, now I gotta like do this dance where, where I'm starting to like stack them. And then I'm kind of clicking and dragging to set a fader position. Whereas if I'm in SSL 360, even if I didn't have an SSL UF8, I could still change the plugin fader here. And so I have all of my plugin parameters all accessible in one spot. That's really cool. But when you pair it with the SSL UF8, right, now I'm moving 3 different faders at a time, and it's literally like working on one of their consoles, but just digitally. And of course, you can see on my screen that I am manipulating all of these all at once. So that's really cool. Now, if you had the UC one, you could take it quite a bit further because you could also control and grab onto the EQ section, and it's a one-to-one control. So you have the exact same controls literally right in front of you. This is why the system is so powerful and why I like it so much. If we jump back over into Luna, if you wanted to mix like you're on an analog console, what you would actually end up doing is, say these channels here, right? We're just gonna completely reset those. So these are at unity, and really what you do is just leave your DAWs faders at unity, and then within the plugin window itself, this is where you would start to move the fader, right? So you're mixing here, and then it's returning down the DAWs channel at unity. So, you know, it's just really cool. It's kind of like a way of taking advantage of the quote blue can fader that they've modeled. So kind of neat. Now, I guess all of that would be for nothing if it sounded bad. So like, why don't we check out a couple of these features here? Now look, it's an SSL console. So like for the most part, it should be pretty transparent at first. Okay, so here's the drum bus. We're gonna kind of see how this drive reacts and some of the width controls and stuff. We'll show you what that does, maybe the impedance too. Here's before. Now, I don't know if you're paying attention to the meter here. This is the last thing in the chain, and you can see that signal is going from peaking way up here to peaking way down here. And the reason that that's important to note is because that's the compensated gain function that's happening that I've mentioned and talked about in a few other videos with other plugin developers that do the same kind of thing. But as you drive this up, it's automatically gaining down the output. It's compensating for that drive naturally and equally. So it's really nice. Let's watch it again. So this isn't really like a mix tutorial or anything like that, but it is a cool way of using drive to kind of control the transients and make the drums be perceived as the same volume, but from a signal level standpoint, you know, you're not hitting anywhere near the same peak level, allowing you to kind of get louder mixes, right? That's kind of what you hear discussed a lot on the internet about like how to get bigger drums or how to get louder mixes, and you want saturation, etc. And this is a really quick way to do it. Drive it up, let it do all of the heavy lifting for you. All right, next let's check out this width control, because I find myself sometimes reaching for this with these SSL console emulations, is the width control. I mean, that's a really cool way to make that ambience kind of stick out a bit more. Let's bring some of this in context. Yeah, pretty neat. Definitely kind of brings that ambience a little bit more forward in this case. Let's check out the impedance now. So think of this more as like tone shaping, and how useful using these two controls and parameters would be to get distorted drum sounds or like room drum sounds. You get it pretty quick. Nice distortion. Just think like a drum room where you want it crushed and distorted, and you know, maybe some of the top and bottom fidelity is kind of gone a bit. This is a really unique and interesting way to get to that point. And because again, this drive is on the 4K-E, but the impedance is not, getting this G series plugin becomes a little bit more valuable to pick this up, because you're kind of getting both at the same time, right? It's cool. So my theory on using this kind of console emulation and throwing it across every channel, less is gonna be more. What you might do across one track, you know, make sure you're dialing it back on all the others too, because it's just going to keep adding and adding and adding and adding, right? But for these demonstrations, like, it is cool to kind of see everything taken way too far. At least for me, that's how I've always kind of figured out what a plugin or a tool is capable of, is just seeing it go way too far. All right, moving on. Let's try looking at the EQ. Let's look at the electric guitars here. Now, if you're one of those people that need to see something to understand it, I've got an instance of Fab Filter here, and we're gonna mess around with this high-mid section on these guitars. I've got Fab Filter pulled up so you can actually see what's happening to kind of the signal itself when we mess with this EQ, but they have tooltips on this thing. So when you hover over it, it's actually going to tell you when you have this high mid frequency multiplier engaged. It's going to tell you what frequency you're actually kind of like hovering on, which sometimes is helpful to know. By default, it's going to be somewhere around 3K. And so then you can boost or cut. You have your standard kind of width or Q factor, right? And yeah, this is what it sounds like. So why this becomes really useful, like I mentioned, is you can start to fix things in regions that you might not otherwise be able to get. Because again, this only goes up to 7K, right? Like say it didn't have this high mid frequency multiplier here, you're stuck at 7K, and that's as high as you can go to create a really narrow band and cut. Visually, what that would look like is like this, right? We go up to 7K, and where are we at? Somewhere in there. And we're making a 12 dB cut. So it'd be something like that. And what's our Q? Yeah, something like that, right? We're making a sharp cut. But because we have this high frequency, high mid frequency multiplier, we can go up to 21K. So now you can reach way up here as well. And that's really cool because you can do things like that. And you can kind of calibrate and make these really precise moves in the top end. So this is really useful, and hopefully this is a good visual representation. Now, these aren't the exact curves, but just visually, it's kind of, in so many words, that's kind of what's happening there and why it's unique and why it's cool. And same thing here in this low mid thing. So normally you'd go down to like 200 hertz or you're at 1000 hertz and you do this, and now you're at 330 hertz, and you can go down into 70 hertz and get really specific with your moves. At the time, this would have been incredibly handy to have as a mix engineer, to have that precision. Of course, these days we have FabFilter, and you can do literally whatever you want, as much as you want. What's still cool about having this is that you're limiting yourself to that console workflow. So I mentioned this before, but when you have these emulation plugins, it's not meant to solve the problem so much in the same way that something like FabFilter could. What it's really intending you to do is limit your decision making to that workflow and ultimately come out the other side with a more analog sounding mix because your workflow is limited. That's kind of the whole point. So I think it's really cool what they've done here. And so we've taken a look at the drive on drums. Here's what it's going to sound like on electric guitars if you're driving those way too much. So you can hear it gets really bitey really quick. If you kind of like find the right spot, you can kind of get a nice tone from that. And honestly, it's one of those season to taste kind of things. So take it with a grain of salt. Impedance, same thing. Now again, if we go back to the tone shape theory, you can start to mess around with this. So you pull this impedance down. It's just interesting how you can shape the signal in ways that you probably would never ever get to if you were just using something like the FabFilter, right? So it's not that you can do something with another tool. It's more so how you get to the area that you want with the tool, okay? That's what makes this unique. All right, so I don't really want to get too far into the weeds on the sound demos of the plugin. There's 1,000,001 really great sound demos out there. SSL put out a bunch when they launched this plugin. So if you're really curious on the sound, go check those out. This video was really intended to be more of like the workflow side of things because, you know, again, if you didn't know what the high mid frequency switches did and you didn't know what the whole SSL ecosystem can do, you might just think that this is another SSL emulation and I've already got one. Why do I need this, etc. So I really think that there's a good distinction between why this exists and why it should exist in your workflow. And so for me, you know, my first SSL plugin that I had was the UAD SSL 4K, and I freaking love it, right? But it is a DSP-based emulation, and so for one, you could run out of DSP, but they recently did the whole UAD X version of it, which is great. So you can have that, but where that one lives in my workflow is anytime I'm doing real-time tracking, I'm living with that on the Apollo, right? Like that's going on the way in, I'm printing the sound, and that's that. If I'm gonna be doing something where it's in post-production, where I'm mixing and trying to recreate that emulation of the SSL console, well, I've got this whole system now, and I'm really happy with how this interacts with 360 and how it passes off kind of just like a real analog desk would, where you come out of the box, you go and you start mixing here, but you're getting that next level non-linearity from that blue can fader, right? So I think there's definitely a world where this plugin exists and coexists with all of the other SSL plugins if you do happen to have something like the UAD SSL 4K. So yeah, we heard the console distortion sound, we heard the way the width tool works and why that's cool. We heard a little bit of the EQ, but more so the flexibility of the EQ. We heard the impedance and how that can kind of help tone shape. And we kind of dove through how all of that interacts across the SSL the SSL UF8 system and how that works within your DAW. So yeah, really, really unique. At some point, I'll probably pick up the UC1 and you'll see that sitting on this desk. I don't know if I need to reformat this desk and change things up because I'm running out of space, but yeah, the whole system is amazing, and this just adds to that whole ecosystem. So I'm really excited about it. I picked it up as a UF8 user for their for a special. So if you have the UF8, you should check that special out. I don't know how long they're gonna have that. Of course, this video is gonna live on indefinitely. So if it's 2 years down the line, I don't know if that still exists. If you're still curious about the sound, go check out some of the SSL videos on their channel. They got a lot of really great stuff on it. And plenty of other really good creators too have made videos on this now at this point. So there's plenty of sound examples. I really wanted this video to kind of be more unique about the workflow itself. So anyways, hopefully you found that helpful. All right, to sum up, in short, this plugin model is kind of like getting everything all at once with an SSL emulation. You get an SSL 4K-E drive, you get an FX383 emulation, you get a pink knob EQ and the 242 EQ, you get refined dynamics controls, and if you throw this across all of your channels and you have an SSL UF8, you have your own SSL digital analog console hybrid thing going on. So let me know what your thoughts are on this new SSL emulation. Do you dig it? Do you want to try it yourself? Let me know in the comments. To support the channel further, to keep these spotlights happening on the YouTube channel, check out my latest mix courses at thestevekinney.com. I'll see you soon. Cheers.